Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the session on Reshaping Asia's Energy Future, Indo-Japanese Energy Cooperation. This is the third session under the series, India-Japan Partnership Perspectives, organized by the Center with the support of the Nippon Foundation. The initiative aims to enhance strategic ties between two of the most vibrant democracies in Asia. The Center will be organizing several digital sessions under this series to explore the contours of this truly special partnership. We are very happy to have with us two great speakers for this session. Mr. Hirofumi Katase, Executive Vice Chairman and member of the board, IPULSE. Mr. Katase is also a member of the Japan-India Strategic Dialogue convened by the Center. Thank you very much for being here with us today. We are really delighted to have you. Dr. Ajay Mathur, Director, the Energy and Resource Institute. Dr. Mathur is a part of the Center's India-US Strategic Dialogue on Climate Change and Energy. So glad you could be here with us today.
Such a pleasure.
Thank you, Dr. Mathur. We also have with us James Abraham, Founder and Director, Solar Rise and Trustee, Ananta Center. James is very actively involved in the Center's leadership initiatives and track to dialogue on climate change and energy. Thank you for chairing the session today. James, it's always a pleasure to have you with us. We really look forward to the discussions today, and I will now request James to please chair the session.
Thank you very much, Harshit, and thank you, Ananta Aspen Center with the Nippon Foundation for hosting this conversation on the future of Asia's energy and what the reshaping would look like. It's a really interesting time in energy around the world, and especially true for our two countries, India and Japan, when Japan, as a developing country, has to rethink its energy portfolio, moving away from conventional, and even rethinking what role nuclear plays, how different it is with transport compared to the industrial requirements for energy. And India is on the other side of the spectrum on development, where we are actually starting and growing our energy portfolio. And we have to rethink not about transition as much as it is about building. And what kind of an energy future do we build into our country? And both of our two countries together have lessons for all of Asia as we reshape our energy portfolio. A lot of questions ahead, and I'm really excited to have both Katase-san and Ajay join us for this. You heard their introductions. I'll just say one quick other thing. Katase-san had a long and illustrious career with METI, with the government of Japan. For those of you who know, METI was at the center of a lot of the decisions and partnerships that helped Japan create an industrial center and future for itself. And Katase-san especially was involved in a lot of the agreements between Japan, the EU, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And so he's just an ideal person to think about how our two countries can work together as we reshape this future. Ajay too, along with his role at TERI, is actively engaged in negotiations. He's on the Prime Minister's Council for Climate Change and also headed the climate change team at the World Bank, and is no stranger to the idea of international agreements and partnerships when it comes to rethinking the reshaping energy. So thank you both for joining us. What I'd like to do is open it up to the two of you. We'll spend 20 minutes with the two of you, and then we'll have a conversation and some Q&A. Those of you who are watching, if you have any questions, please don't have to wait for the end. As they come to you, please do put the questions up on the chat, or if you're on the Facebook page, on the chat there. We'll consolidate those questions into our conversation, and we'll have time to get to most of them. Thank you. Katase-san, if I can ask you to open up for us.
Thank you very much, Jim. So first of all, I would like to thank you, Ananta Aspen Center Nippon Foundation, for inviting me to this very interesting and important webinar. Actually, I feel very honored and humbled to speak there because the Indo-Japan Energy Cooperation is now entering to a new phase. In the past, we had 10 ministerial meetings and many experts level meetings, and also the participation from the business, not only the government. But the reason I'm saying that we are entering into the new phase is that First, on Japanese side, the new Prime Minister Suga has recently announced the new policy to work toward a goal of achieving zero GHG emission in 2050. And the rest of the world is also accelerating the move towards zero GHG emission. For example, the EU is advancing new big initiatives to bring about a zero carbon economy as a part of the economic stimulus package. And I'm sure that the United States, under the new administration, will launch a Green New Deal to do the same. And on the people side, I think every people on Earth, after the COVID-19 and having experienced a clean air and the way of low energy intensive life, they are becoming even more committed to the cause of tackling global warming and also clean air. But of course, this is not an easy challenge. Energy is the blood of the social activity. And the people in developing countries has a right to become wealthy and spend a decent life. So I think to achieve such an ambitious goal, innovation is a key. And for our bilateral collaboration, we should focus on how to maximize technology development and also how to disseminate these fruits of innovation. So let me focus on a few areas that I think important. The first is the electricity and renewable energy. We tend to focus on the sources of renewable energy, such as PV or wind power. But as the gym business testified, I think there are a lot of new innovation in this source of the renewable energy. And there is going to be more coming from the business. But what is as important as a source of electricity is how to integrate these new renewable sources, sometimes intermittent sources, into a stable supply, into a grid. And this area needs to focus more of the government effort. I would like to compliment that the current Indo-Japan cooperation is putting focus on this area, which is a very good thing. They are doing studies, for example, on the load balancing capability. But actually, they are still on the preliminary study stage. So it's very important to accelerate this study and move to the implementation stage. The second area is the hydrogen. Hydrogen will be important for three reasons, I think. The first is for the transport. The battery electric vehicle, BEV, of course, will be very effective for passenger cars, but not so much for the trucks or bus, because the BEV is not as powerful as necessary. So hence comes the importance of the fuel cell vehicle. And of course, hydrogen will be critical. And secondly is the reason is the intermittency problem of PV and wind. So we need some form of the very economic storage. This could be battery, but of course, if we be able to create, produce the hydrogen at a cheap cost, this will be the solution. And the third reason is of the importance of hydrogen is that it could be produced in the gas producing countries by reforming the gas and putting the CO2 under the ground as a form of CCS, and then transport it to the consuming countries such as India and ourselves. And so hydrogen will be very important. And in this area, we have just started discussion on regulatory framework. But I think we need to accelerate these discussions and also launch some demonstration project in the future. And also in the future, we should work on the third country gas production field to reform the gas and transport it to in India or Japan. The third area is energy efficiency. Currently, we are working together to combine the Indian Perform, Achieve, and Trade PAT scheme and the Japanese sectorial knowledge for the improved energy efficiency. And this is, I think, is a very good approach because the sectorial approach is better to tackle this global warming issue globally. Unless we improve the sectorial efficiency all over the world, we will not be able to optimize the carbon emission reduction. So I think we are choosing the right path. So we should try to accelerate it. And I believe that if it is successful, our bilateral cooperation could be the model of the whole world. So I have just highlighted the three areas. But what is important is, I said, how to implement it so that this collaboration will have the real and big impact. One way is to create some sort of mechanism to accelerate these efforts. And I would like to just cite one idea, which is a joint crediting mechanism called JCM. And this is the mechanism that has been advocated by Japan. And the idea is have a bilateral arrangement so that collaboration between the business from the two countries will be measured in terms of the outcome of this, the GHG reductions. These reductions will be credited according to what has been agreed. And actually, Japan has started such a collaboration with 17 countries, such as Indonesia, Vietnam, or Saudi Arabia. And I think this could be one of the ideas that will need attention and discussion so that our bilateral collaboration will actually have the real impact and also bring about the business-to-business collaboration. So I think that time is up, and this concludes my opening statement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katase-san. Ajay?
Thank you very much, James. And again, many thanks to the Ananta Center, Harshit, Pranya, etc., for enabling this. This, I think, is an extremely timely and relevant issue that we need to address. Obviously, over the past many years, and Katase-san is a witness, not just a witness, an active participant in how this relationship between India and Japan has grown. We have seen a lot of joint technology work happening in the area of energy. If you look at where is the largest amount of energy used, well, if you're looking at business to business, it's in the electricity generation area. If you're looking at people, it's in transportation, in cars. And in both of these areas, Japan has a preeminent status. If you look at these supercritical power stations, The equipment is supplied largely by L&T and MHI, Mitsubishi Heavy Industries joint venture. If you look at transportation, the largest selling car company in India is Maruti, a part of Suzuki. In other words, for a very, very long time, we have had very successful cooperation in the energy area. There's more cooperation even when you look downstream. As Katase-san mentioned, in the energy efficiency area, most of the improvements that have occurred in the steel industry, the top recovery turbines and so on, have been with Japanese technology. Nippon Steel has been a great partner, first with Tata Steel and now with the other steel companies in enabling it. Similarly, if you look at waste heat recovery, particularly in cement plants, but across all plants, the India-Japan relationship is what enabled this, this technology to come into India. So the first point that I'd like to leave us with is that there's a very strong and demonstrable cooperation in the energy area that already exists. The second point that I'd like to make is that the energy sector, whether in India or in Japan, is undergoing major transition. In India already, and James, this is your area, solar electricity is already the cheapest electricity that is available in India, but only when the sun is shining. But we have, through tenders, done a price discovery that 2 years from now, electricity from solar plus batteries will be cheaper than coal electricity. We are at a cusp. Consequently, the further price reduction of batteries is at the heart of how we move into the future. We will electrify many areas, including transport, and therefore looking at electric vehicles becomes an important issue. We will also look at many areas where electrification is not possible. Today, if we are using fossil fuel for long distance transport, or if you are using it for high temperature, or if you're using it for steel making, coke for steel making, for example, those are areas where we do not have electricity-based solutions. The one fuel that makes sense in all of these areas is hydrogen. So in my view, batteries, electric transport, and hydrogen become the three areas where Japan and India have a common committed future. This is very much along the lines that Katase-san also mentioned. What is it that we can do? I would propose that in the batteries area, we already have the start of some relationships, but I think this is an area where the relationships need to grow. And consequently, a bringing together of partners, a bringing together of the kinds of technologies for tomorrow make great sense. As the most successful India-Japan collaborations in the past have shown, whether it is the Mitsubishi L&T collaboration or the Maruti's, the Suzuki, it used to be a collaboration, now of course is a Suzuki venture. I think what tells us is that manufacturing in India is where we get the kinds of price benefits and the design benefits that are needed. The senior management of Maruti told me once that today, and Katase-san, I cannot vouch for this, that today the single largest chunk of Suzuki's profits come from its India subsidiary. And this is largely because they have now started designing cars for Indian needs. If such a manufacturing facility or design facility did not exist, this would not have been possible. So I'd like to leave us with the second point, which is that in order to move ahead in the batteries area or the electric vehicles area or the hydrogen area, we need to see how we can enable these kinds of joint ventures. But joint ventures will occur when there is a demand. And therefore, I want to move to the next step, which is how do we create demand? In the area of electricity, I think the demand is going to be created by economic reasons. Policy will help. The integration is necessary. Without the integration, as Katase-san said, it will not be possible to pull in a lot of variable renewable energy, and consequently that policy actions to ensure that more and more variable renewable electricity can be pulled in will also help build up the demand for and market for hydrogen. That can enable the joint ventures to thrive. The second area where I think we need to bring people together, and again, the presence of Japanese companies, whether it is Maruti or Toyota in India, is in electric vehicles. Now, Japan has moved ahead a great deal in fuel cell based vehicles, in hydrogen fueled vehicles. And consequently, we need to look at hydrogen generation and its supply and the availability of cars which can use it. So this is a good the India-Japan collaboration is a good way of hitting both the egg and the chicken. You can create the cars which need the hydrogen, and you can create the hydrogen which the cars need. So the timing issue can be addressed as well. The key challenge here is we need to get hydrogen at a price which makes sense. Today, when we use renewable electricity to make hydrogen, it costs somewhere in the vicinity of $5 plus per kg. And when we use gas to make hydrogen, as is used in the fertilizer industry and the refinery industry, today's price is somewhere in the vicinity of about $2 per kg in Indian terms. So we need to come from the $5.50 to $2. That is the challenge. Our analysis indicates that the single largest impact is of the cost of the electrolyzer. When you use renewable energy to split water and make hydrogen, you're obviously not using it 100% of the time, and consequently the cost of the electrolyzer greatly determines this. Now, what we see is that the price can come down from about $5.50 to about $3 simply by economies of scale. So if you build up demand, that's possible. The balance of costs will occur because of efficiency. Now, Japan has been a world leader in pushing energy efficiency in a range of appliances and equipment. The best example is the greatest amount of electricity demand in India today is driven by air conditioners. And the best-selling air conditioner is the amazingly energy efficient Daikin air conditioner, again, a Japanese product, which has taken the market because of its inverter technology, the very energy efficient technology. In other words, the Indo-Japanese collaboration could focus on both the manufacturing of electrolyzers as well as the efficiency improvement in electrolyzers. Consequently, I believe that this collaboration is not only possible, but it's timely. We would look at a range of interventions on the policy side as well. Katase-san mentioned some of them. I will not repeat them. I will only add that one of the very successful collaborations has been on the creation of energy efficiency guidelines for a range of industries. And I think we need to ensure that as part of these guidelines, we bring in these new opportunities as well and make sure that these are then implemented through the industry dialogues, but also through dialogues such as the one that we are doing today. So James, this is something that I look up to, I look forward to. Back to you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you both for opening us up. Both of you mentioned hydrogen was a central piece to your conversation. Let's talk a little bit more about that. First, on the demand side, and I think you mentioned the demand side issue here. You mentioned fuel and in transport, but also in industrial applications. That's going to require a fairly significant change in both what we are all assuming as a population, because we've been driven towards electric cars. I don't think our population is thinking about hydrogen, but also in the supply chain of getting the hydrogen out there. And then cars, of course, you mentioned, Japan already has the hydrogen car technology. I've seen them on the roads, and incredibly efficient and powerful cars. How do we make that shift in this country so that we can make this collaboration and partnerships actually quite fruitful? Ajay, you want to start?
James, I am a great one for pulling in lessons from our experiences in the past. So, you know, what I, for example, traveled, we had one of the India-Japan energy dialogue meetings in Japan. I think this was in 2013 when I went for a ride in a pickup, in a Toyota van, which was powered by fuel cells. So it's been around, the filling stations are there. Now, how do we make it happen here? I think one of the key issues is that given the infrastructure for its delivery, it will have to, in a sense, mirror the delivery system for petrol. And therefore, the participation of the oil delivery or the oil marketing companies, Indian Oil, HP, BP, is amazingly important. We need to get them into the dialogue, as well as the private sector players, Reliance, SR, etc. The second issue is the availability of the electrolyzers at the places where you want to generate the hydrogen. Now, the good point is that electrolyzers can be put where, number one, the water is, and number two, close to load centers. So the oil companies can decide where they want to locate these electrolyzers, which make hydrogen and supply it into the urban systems. The third issue, and this is a little more complex issue, is that if you're looking at the realities of today, if you're looking at the market of today, there's no hydrogen. But if you're looking at the market of tomorrow, there is hydrogen. In other words, for a banker who's going to finance this, this is a risk that he sees and does not know how to deal with. Again, this is nothing new. It's happened in the past as well. And the way we do it is to have government guarantees. Consequently, I think an India-Japan Technology Guarantee Fund would help in moving these newer technologies into the market. So James, I'm sorry, this is a long answer, but I thought it would answer some of the questions that you had asked.
Thank you very much. It's a great setup for this. I wanted to continue on this. Pakistan, you mentioned about technology and technology shifts, and connecting to what Ajay mentioned about on the supply side. Let's connect the supply side question, then we'll think through. There's so many areas to explore here. On the supply side question of electrolyzers versus hydrocarbon-based hydrogen generation. And one, of course, is the price difference Ajay brought up, $5 per kilogram versus $5+ per kilogram using electrolyzers versus $2+ How do we bridge this gap? Is there movements around this? Is it just about manufacturing of electrolyzers? And if we don't, then the idea you had of, is there a third country source where we can manufacture the hydrogen and ship it to our different countries? How do you see these two, and how does this evolve over time?
Well, I agree that bringing down the cost of electrolysis of water to produce hydrogen is very important, and I think it will gradually come out. But at the same time, at least in Japan, given that Japan is geographically a very small country, it will not be possible to supply all the hydrogen necessary from Japanese, the PV power plants located in Japan. We may be able to, or may not, we never know. And same thing might apply in India, because I think the India's power consumption needs to increase. So I don't know whether producing the hydrogen from the local PVs will be sufficient. So that's why it's necessary to think about the producing the hydrogen in third country and bring it to us. Of course, there are two ways. The first method is the electrolysis method using PV. For example, in Australia, for example, they have a huge land, and they have a very abundant sunshine. So I think it's possible that they'll be able to produce more than consume and export it to the consuming countries. But the other way, possibility could be even cheaper, which is to produce the hydrogen by deforming the gas very close to the gas field, and separate the CO2 and putting CO2 back underground into the gas field. And of course, this is the traditional EOR. They are doing it already, using CO2 to increase the production of the gas. So there is no such, and of course, also reforming, so separation technology is there, reforming technology is there. So there is no technical challenge, huge challenge in doing that. The challenge may be on the transport side, how to cheaply transport hydrogen from third country to the consuming countries. There are two ways. The one way is to transport it as it is, or in the form of the hydrate, for example, in a more stable manner, and separate it when it arrives in the consuming countries. Second approach is to produce the ammonium and on the site, and transport it as an ammonium and use it ammonium. And this could be cheaper. For example, you can use ammonium in the existing coal plant, step by step, from like 15% and increase it up to 100%. Of course, we need to put some facility to cope with the potential air pollution issue, but the technology is already there. So I think these are the two approaches that we need to think from if we are to import the hydrogen from the third country.
Thank you. Ajay, yes.
Yeah, James, I think Katase-san has made a very important point in which we are looking at gas as being converted into hydrogen. This has the huge advantage of maintaining the geopolitical relations that we have with the current oil and particularly the gas producers, which I think is very important as we look to any global transition, energy transition. The challenge here in our view, in Terry's view, is really an economic challenge, because one, we are converting the gas into hydrogen. We know that it is competitive. We know as far as the fertilizer and refinery industry is concerned. But then you are converting the gas into ammonia. Now, that is an extra cost. That cost has to be less than the cost of whatever else that we are doing. But the point that I would like to make is that it is the gas conversion to hydrogen plus something else. So in a country like India, where even today gas power plants do not get merit order priority because they are so much more expensive than coal, and we are seeing that PV is becoming even cheaper than coal. So I wonder whether gas, which is gas plus, or hydrogen, which is gas plus, would get any merit order priority in the electricity system. But there are other applications. For example, we can look at steel. In steel, we use coke for reduction. Instead of coke, if you use this hydrogen, then you can have direct reduction and there is no CO2 emissions. So it's not as if there aren't possibilities, but I think we'll have to do a sector by sector analysis, an economic analysis of what is the kind of technology that makes sense.
It also feels like this is a place where partnerships between our two countries of corporates who are engaged in this work already, as you both brought up examples of these partnerships in the past that have led to industries forming, and maybe we're at the cusp of one of those. And it's up to us to start to bring the players together and let them sort it out. They're both, we have both the technical and the business side of this. But one of the elements both of you brought up was the idea of demonstration projects and high risk financing, which require guarantees. Is this a place, especially in a space like this, where we need to create the protected risk space for both technologists and business people to embrace a new industry or a new formation of a new supply chain and distribution chain? Is this an area where you see traction happening? Is this the place where both of our countries can together get engaged to build up this new economy? Katasistan, would you like to start?
Yes. In the past, our two countries have been working on the demonstration project. And the way it was funded is, it was funded as a NEDO, or Japanese New Energy Development Organization, which is a government-related entity. They have been funding this as a part of the research. It's a big demonstration, but it's part of research. And there are several such projects in India. So as the first case, I mean, as a first project to employ a new technology, I think this mechanism could continue to be viable. But the issue is how to follow it up with a second, third, and many projects. And there comes the necessity to come up with some financing. As the Mr. Mathur mentioned, we may need to come up with some sort of the creative financing scheme, bringing about private banks, but of course leverage on some of the government big pocket, such as guarantee. And I think we need to work on that. But as far as I'm aware, any countries in the world has been successfully being able to deploy that sort of the scheme in huge volume. I think we need to have the very intensive discussion on the best way to do that.
Thank you. Ajay?
The fact that there is a working India-Japan energy dialogue, which meets every year. It couldn't meet this year because of 6 months taken out of the calendar because of the COVID, but it occurs at the level of the Minister of METI on the Japanese side and the Minister for Energy and the Minister for Petroleum on the Indian side. And this, I think there have been at least 10 or 11 meetings like this. And then there are subgroups which look at the electricity sector, at the petroleum sector, at the energy efficiency sector, and so on. In all of these meetings, one of the things that has consistently been highlighted is the need to see how we move ahead. In every meeting we decide something, it gets done, and we move ahead. So this is very, very different from what we have seen in many other, in collaboration with many other countries. And there is, because of this, there is a huge amount of confidence and trust, at least by India on the Japanese side, and I hope by Japan on the Indian side. Within this context, now it is possible, therefore, to create a financing mechanism which employs either some kinds of interest subventions or guarantees. I'm not going to judge what is the mechanism, but the point is we have got budgetary resources being added to private sector resources that are being pulled in to take care of the kind of risks that we see associated with these newer technologies. It is possible, and I think the timing is right. Kadazi-san had earlier mentioned the joint crediting mechanism. And that itself can be a very interesting mechanism to provide the kinds of resources that are needed for the early projects, for the first projects.
Wonderful. Let's talk about one other area, and then I want to open it up to questions. Lots of questions coming up on our Q&A. Those of you who are watching, if you do have questions, please add it to the Q&A on Zoom or the chat box on Facebook Live. The question of energy efficiency, on how efficient are our industries and sectors becoming? What has been the history, and what do you see as the world going forward? And I think each of our countries have made moves in and of ourselves. Is there opportunity for us to share and actually accelerate each other's efforts?
James, energy efficiency is one area in which we blindly copy what Japan has done. If you look at our Energy Conservation Act, there are places in it which so closely reflect the basic energy conservation law of Japan. Energy auditors, the need for audits, etc. We did not, but there are other things which we have not been able to bring in because we have a very different legal system. The top 10 method, for example, is something that Japan uses. We use the more pedestrian standards and labeling program. But as a result of this, we have had a very long cooperation between Japan and India. Indian energy auditors have gone to Japan. There have been people from Japan who have been posted in India. So I talked of the steel sector, of the cement sector, where new energy efficiency technologies have come in. This is an area where I think the collaboration needs to continue, because we need to keep learning from the cutting edge work that Japan is and has been doing.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think energy conservation area is maybe the most advanced and the most successful on the bilateral collaboration. I think Japan has started to advocate such the sectorial approach that I spoke about at the start, because we believe that it's relatively easy to reduce the sectorial energy consumption if the best technology is applied across the board. So that's why we have been advocating sectorial approach, and I'm very happy that India agreed to that kind of the approach and came up with its own scheme, this Perform, Achieve and Trade scheme. What is good is that after India has applied this PAT scheme, we are continue to support this by providing our own guideline as well as our technical expertise. So this is clearly the way that we should advance.
Wonderful, wonderful. I'm going to create some space. I have a lot more questions, of course, but I think I'm just being somewhat monopolistic with your time. Let me open it up to some questions from our audience. Commodore Samdar had asked several questions going back to hydrogen. The one that, let me just bring up one that struck me, is a pilot project. He's suggesting a pilot project under GICA to be done for a hybrid renewable energy driven electrolysis plant. It's a technology that seems to be available, but we need to create a demonstration project that might work really well in some of our island nations, especially or islands in and around India. Is this an area that would work? Katasna?
Yeah, I think this could be a very interesting and good occasion. I'm not in a position to speak on behalf of JICA, but understand that JICA has a general sort of the scheme to support the project through yen loan or through the grant. And I personally believe this is a good idea.
And one other quick one to you, Mr. Kadasan. Mr. Matai had asked, is there any update on JOGMEC's pioneering work in using gas hydrates?
you mean the methyl hydride
Yes.
in Japan? Yeah, JOGMEC has been working for this for more than 10 years. This is a very disruptive project because if we can use and monetize it, this will give, for example, Japan more than 100 years of gas supply. But so far, it's still remaining on the research and development stage.
There's a set of questions on electric vehicles. Let me start with the one that struck me. It came from an anonymous person that's on everybody's mind. Do you both feel, or what's your view on hydrogen as the fuel for transport, overtaking and replacing electric vehicles as the current, current theme? Ajay?
This is a very application-specific answer. If you're looking at short distances being driven, for example, within an urban area, an direct electric based on batteries would work because you don't need very large batteries. But if you're talking of intercity transport, whether it is a bus or a truck, the amount of batteries that you would need to put add so much weight that it takes a lot of the payload to take care of the batteries itself. It decreases the payload. It is in places like that where a hydrogen tank with a fuel cell makes great sense. There's also been an argument that while batteries could work in two-wheelers, in three-wheelers, in the supply vehicles in urban areas, for four-wheelers, largely because of the time that it would take to replace the battery. You would need a robotic arm to take the battery out and replace it, or a lot of time to charge it again. It may be better to go for a fuel cell system. So on the car side, the jury is still out. But I think on the long distance transport, we are clearly seeing that electric through the hydrogen fuel cell route may be preferable to the battery route.
Kata-san, what's the experience in Japan in the pros and cons?
Well, yeah, I would say that the fuel cell will be critical for the heavy load transport, such as the bus and trucks, because the energy density of the batteries is not sufficient for the heavy load. So what I see is that in the future, first on the passenger vehicle, of course, the BEVs will be dominant, whereas in the heavy transport, the truck and the bus, fuel cell will be dominant. And under such a situation, I think there will be a development of the hydrogen stations across the country.
Yeah.
And then even for passenger cars, the fuel cell vehicles could be the option. Because as Mr. Matha said, in terms of the range, a fuel cell could be far better than battery vehicles. And also on battery vehicle, we should not forget that there is a potential limit, which is the whether we can find sufficient metal, nickel, cobalt, and copper. For example, if you take nickel and cobalt, everybody is now aware that there will be a huge shortage of these metals if the BEVs share will increase such as for 10%. So that's why, for example, countries such as China is now focusing on fuel cell vehicles, even for passenger cars, because I think everybody is now getting aware that there is the limit of the metal supply.
That brings me to another question that's been raised by Mr. Mathur about the role of India and Japan in thinking through the batteries part of the energy chain. As both of you said, in some parts, we will still need batteries. We will still have batteries, like the traditional EV storage batteries where rare earths will be required. He's asking, should we be spending time and focusing our efforts on ensuring some rare earth supply as a collaboration between us? I want to add to that a point Ajay made about one of the benefits of India's collaboration historically in business has been India's ability to add low-cost design and low-cost manufacturing to the value chain. Design and price benefits, as Ajay mentioned. Are those benefits we could jointly apply to the batteries value chain and create some sort of a supply base for us and for the world? So the rare earths question and the design and cost question. Ajay, would you like to come in?
James, I obviously believe we can. I think, this happened in the last ministers meeting also, that we looked at potential collaboration, which could look at the Indian markets, but also at markets in other countries. And that is where I think your question leads us to. The design clearly for developing country situations is somewhat different depending on which technology you talk about, because whether it is the quality of the iron ore or the driving cycle of a vehicle, they are very different between a developed country and a developing country. The second point, I think, which is important, is that we have seen that the relative availability of technologies and the relative availability of financing, and especially lower cost financing in Japan, enables us to cross the early hurdles that are there in investing in these kinds of technologies.
Thank you. Hassan?
I think definitely India could be a very important manufacturing base for Japanese industry. Of course, because of the size of the India, but also the cost of production in India, even on the already on the vehicles production, some of the car makers has been planning to produce the cars in India and bring it back to Japan, for example, or exporting to Africa. And the more the issue of the carbon footprint emerge, the more the importance of reducing the distance of transportation. So for example, if Japanese industry is to export cars to Africa, EV to Africa, of course, producing the battery in the India will reduce the carbon footprint of this car.
Thank you. One question from Commodore Samudar to help us expand the gamut of our reshaping of energy in Asia, which is to looking beyond photovoltaic, wind, battery, and hydrogen technologies. His question is, what are the opportunities in nuclear power corporation, or tidal, or geothermal energy? What role do you or wave energy? And we can add solar thermal to the list, though. That particular technology has had its ups and downs. How do you see these playing a role? Do you see a role for them in the gamut of energy, of Asia's energy future, or not? And if so, what role do you see them playing? Katasunan?
Yes, I think definitely nuclear is critical, continue to be a critical energy because this is very stable and low carbon. What is very important to ensure the safety, Japan has a very strong expertise or experience on ensuring the safety of the power plants, especially having the very unfortunate accident in Fukushima. So I'm sure that the cooperation nuclear will be important in the future. On geothermal, I personally believe that geothermal power deserve more attention Uh, because in Japan, we are supposed to have the third largest geothermal resources in the world after United States, Indonesia. But we are far lacking in terms of actual power plant, geothermal power plant. And of course, this is due to some geographical constraints that, for example, some resources are in a national park, but still the geothermal energy could play a major role. For example, the United States has just launched a new initiative called GeoVision. This is a Department of Energy policy. And the Department of Energy has calculated that the potential of geothermal power plant in the United States is more than 5,400 gigawatt. 5 times the current total power production in the United States. But this is not the conventional geothermal technology. What they are trying to do is to do advanced something called EGS, Enhanced Geothermal System. So this is a new way of producing the electricity. You dig the hole and you inject the water underground and you warm this temperature and put it out as a vapor. The current technology is that you're just trying to find hot water underground. But sometimes where there is a hot rocks, there is not sufficient water. So in the current technology, you need both hot rock and the water. But this EGS require only hot rocks. And this will sort of open up the doors to the huge volume of geothermal production. And so this is a way that I think the countries such as us or such as India should try to think and move.
Thank you. Ajay?
I take a economic and in electricity system based approach. I also take a political approach. It was the two sides, after a huge amount of discussion, agreed that cooperation in the nuclear energy area should be part of the bilateral dialogue. I think this happened either at the 6th or the 7th ministerial meeting. But it is interesting that in the 8th, 9th, 10th meetings, there was no discussion on nuclear. And I think it is important to look at why it happened for very different reasons. Whether it was the challenging environment for nuclear in Japan, or whether it was the economics of nuclear power in India. This is something that did not rise to the level of inter-country cooperation. But the only point that I'd like to leave with us is that we have solar electricity, which is very inexpensive. We have solar plus batteries, which hopefully will be somewhat more expensive, but still less than the price of coal. Nuclear is even more than coal. So the only way nuclear can be viable is if there is an explicit premium provided to it for its zero carbon value. That's my take on it. On the geothermal, the problem is somewhat different. I mean, unlike Japan, we do not have as much geothermal resources as Japan does. The places where we do have are very far from where electricity loads are. They are great if we could somehow use the heat in those places itself. Because if you convert it into electricity, again, the costs become very high. And as I said, they're very far from where the load centers are. So I think we need to look at both nuclear and geothermal from the lens of the costs as well as the dynamics of supplying electricity to users.
I realize we've come to the end of our hour, and I must have a conversation with the Ananta Aspen Center about why this is only an hour, because we can easily spend far more time. There's so much more that we need to cover. I'm looking at all the questions. I do want to leave with one thought, thinking about the world that the two of you have painted in the next, for my kids and their generation, it just feels so different. We grew up looking at industrial sectors as these smokestacks that are only polluting, and you're talking about an industrial sector that's incredibly clean. We grew up with every time we turned on electricity thinking about a coal power plant that's powering it, and you're talking about a very different electricity that's carbon free, that's effectively emissions free. Same thing with cars. We got into cars thinking about the exhaust at the back, and you're talking about a transport sector that is, it's effectively thinking about guilt-free energy. That's a very different world. But between here and there, we've talked about technology changes and risk finance and business, but there's also a massive transition issue. We'll have to reskill our populations. We have to rethink supply chains. We have to rethink delivery, how energy is used and priced. So there's a massive market development process and both cost and transitions in our economies that are also up ahead. It's exciting, and I'm really glad that the two of our countries are sharing and working together in this journey. Thank you, Ajay. Thank you, Katasi-san, for joining us, and Ananta Aspen Center, and the Nippon Foundation for helping us have this conversation.
And many thanks to you, James, and obviously to the Ananta Center.
Thank you. Thank you, Katasi.
Thank you very much, James. Thank you. Thank you,
Have a
Ajay.
great day, everyone.
Thank you.